All right, Joellen.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about invasive plants, right? Always an interesting conversation, right?
It is very interesting. And let's start out with a definition. I mean, what is an invasive plant? Okay. It is a plant that causes some kind of ecological or economic harm in a new environment where it's not native.
Okay, where it's not native.
Where it's not native. Now, invasive plants are capable of doing quite a few things. They cause extinction of native plants and animals. They also reduce biodiversity in an area. And of course, they compete with native organisms for the limited resources that are there. And they alter habitats. So you don't really think about it, but we're going to talk about enough that maybe people will start thinking about, the plants that they buy.
Okay.
Of course, plants with the highest invasive potential. They are prolific seeders.
Of course.
They are vigorous growers. They adapt well to any different kind of environmental conditions to grow in, which sounds like what? A desirable plant that we all want in our gardens, right?
It sounds like something you would want.
Yes,
for sure.
That's all of the qualities that we would like to have for our own garden plant, which is how they've.
I would agree.
This is exactly what's happened. Now, if seeds of these plants leave the garden, by wind or wildlife, because sometimes they get attached to, wildlife that goes by them and then they get dispersed in another yard or out in the woods, or by birds eating the seeds and then dispersing them other places. So, once they get out there, they may outcompete the native plants that are already there. An example would be the Bradford pear. That is the perfect example. Originally, it was given the patent, and now it is grafted. If you look at it, all Bradford pears are grafted onto a rootstock.
Okay.
And when the seeds, they're not real pears, but they're little seed pears. Mockingbirds, I've seen mockingbirds, they absolutely love them, and other birds eat them. They were supposed to be not viable, but unfortunately, they are viable once they go through the bird. And so if you go along I-40 during the spring when the pears are blooming, you can tell you're coming to an exit before you actually get to it, because they've planted Bradford pears there sometime because the birds have dispersed them, and now the wild pears are growing in that area and taking over the native habitat. Right. Pears it's a vigorous tree. These have thorns and everything else. So, I mean, it's not a desirable native plant.
Wow.
And so that is the worst one.
And the thing about the Bradford pear, though, in the spring, they can be so beautiful.
It's beautiful. Golly. Beautiful fall foliage.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
Nice shape. But there are other varieties that, of course, that like the Cleveland, that would be much better to plant. It has the same attributes. Okay. May not grow as vigorously or get as large, but those seeds are not viable. Gotcha. So, I mean, it's just the Bradford pear that has the bad reputation of having the viable seeds that get dispersed.
Wow. And then they break easily.
Yes. Yeah.
The limbs do.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, let's talk about the 6 top invasive plants in the United States. Okay. And we're talking the whole United States.
The whole United States, all right.
Kudzu.
Kudzu.
Number one.
Number one.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was introduced in the United States in 1876. It was for an ornamental or an forage and erosion control plant. 1 million acres was planted in the Southeast by the Soil Conservation Service in the 1930s and 40s. By the 1950s, it was determined that it was invasive. So it did not take long for us to figure out that was an invasive species.
Took over pretty quick.
They took that because it can grow at a rate of 1 foot a day and 60 feet a year.
Think about that.
The vine takes over areas in the whole Southeast. Yeah. I mean, it looks like some odd creatures are out there because it just covers everything.
Trees,
it takes over smothers everything, and nothing can live under it. So there you go.
Kudzu. All right.
The second one is Norway Maple.
Okay.
It was brought to the U.S. in 1756 from Europe by John Bartram, who is a famous plant explorer here in the United States. Okay. So he brought it over, but see, he did not know that it would end up outcompeting the native maples in the Northeast and the Northwest.
Okay.
And that's where it's a very dense canopy. So not only does it take over and it's very aggressive compared to our other native maples, but it shades out the wildflowers that are underneath too because it's got a dense canopy on it.
Wow, how about that? And think about that time period again,
1756, yes.
Wow, okay.
Long time ago.
Long time, okay.
Yeah. The third one, Japanese honeysuckle. I know we all know that, but it was introduced in 1806 as an ornamental for erosion control. You know, it's got a beautiful smell. You can always, in May around here, it smells beautiful out in the woods.
Yes.
But the seeds are dispersed by birds. It is now anywhere from Maine down to Florida, over to Texas, and in spots out west. It is an aggressive vine, and it can girdle. You know, when it starts climbing trees and stuff, it'll girdle the trees. It shades them, and it kind of smothers other native plants. So that's
the honeysuckle, right?
The honeysuckle.
Of course, we remember that from our youth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, golly, how about that?
Yeah, it smells beautiful, but yeah, it's a little aggressive. The fourth one is purple loosestrife. It's a beautiful perennial.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
It's
that.
got gorgeous flowers on it. It was introduced in the 1800s as an ornamental and for medical uses. It grows aggressively in most of the United States. It takes over wetlands. That's the problem. It's taking over wetlands. One plant can produce 2 million seeds.
Ouch.
And of course, the plant itself kind of grows like a bunch, and so it can grow outward at least a foot a year, especially in the wetlands where it really likes it.
Okay.
And then there's Japanese barberry.
Japanese barberry.
Japanese barberry.
We talked about that a time or two.
Yeah, we have. It was introduced in the 1800s as an ornamental garden plant to be a substitute for the European barberry that was found to harbor this black rust stem, a serious fungus disease of cereal crops. So what they did was they ended up substituting a bad plant for another bad plant.
Right.
This is its problem. It grows in deep shade, and it will produce dense thickets, especially in the Northeast.
Okay.
And its seeds are dispersed by birds. The very last one is one we all know, is English ivy.
It's ivy.
English ivy is considered one of the top 6 worst invasive plants in the United States. It was introduced from Europe in the 1700s as an easy-to-grow evergreen ground cover.
Easy to grow.
Which it is.
It is.
But it's an aggressive vine that can kill trees by shading and girdling again.
Okay.
And the seeds, of course, are spread by birds.
So how can we make sure that we're not planting any of these non-native invasive plants?
Well, every area of the country has their own websites and their own lists. Tennessee, here we have 64 species on ours. You can visit our website and see a few of the websites you can visit to look in your area, or use your local state's websites to see if there are invasive plants that are for sale around your area. And just simply don't plant invasive species. Because we can control what's in our garden, what we plant there, but what we can't control is the animals, the insects, the birds, the wind that carries these plants to non-native areas.
That's good stuff. How about that? Interesting. So those are our top 6.
Those top 6.
All right, thank you much. Good information.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. To find out more information on this topic, just click on the familyplotgarden.com link in the description.